Boy, oh boy, where do I even begin, Grimgor? Boss of the East, the once and future Git, the biggest and baddest orc to ever exist. Your exploits are numerous and have caused multiple timelines to diverge because of your sheer likability and unstoppability. You are an absolute unit. How dare Games Workshop deliver such a fate onto you, Grimgor? Those poopy doopies, those stinky Oh, hey, what's up? You just caught me in the middle of my biannual Warhammer Fantasy lore love bombing session, where I realized Warhammer Fantasy exists after a while, and that the orcs there, even if they aren't spacefaring or have the power belief like their sci-fi counterparts, are really cool. So this Grimgor guy is the premier orc of the setting of Warhammer Fantasy, being one of the most terrifying forces in battle, and in notoriety compared to the rest of his kind, being the biggest and baddest orc war boss of all that embodies the beliefs of greenskin culture, that is incredibly warlike, with them being incredibly hungry for war and any conflict at all. So, let's go over Grimgor's grim lore and see what makes this orc the biggest and baddest in Warhammer Fantasy. The story of Grimgor starts out with the orcoid fungus. This sweet little plant makes you green mushroom men that are called orcs, as well as some other subspecies like these little green dudes with big schnozzes called goblins, and some other beasts like a mouth with a pair of legs called a squig. The Chaos Dwarves saw the orcs could be used as a resource, and a most dubious resource indeed: slave labor. The Chaos Dwarves decided that the normal orc needed to be larger and stronger, so by messing with the fungus and Chaos Dwarf magics, they created Black Orcs, which are inspired and share similarities with the Uruk-hai from the Lord of the Rings, where the more resilient Uruk and the stronger ones have darker skin. Which sounds really bad outside of context. You can decide for yourself if it is or not. But Black Orcs are given the name in Warhammer Fantasy because of the armor they wear covering them from head to toe in plate metal. Behind all that armor, they are just larger genetically modified orcs. Then these GMOs broke loose, with the main one being Grimgor Ironhide. Grimgor escaped with a group of these orcs, and they became his unbeatable warband called the Immortals, with them being a crucial reason why Grimgor has been an unstoppable force that has never lost a battle, spending most of his time ping-ponging around his side of the world and going where he pleases, and destroys everything. So, why the heck hasn't Grimgor covered the world in a great green tide that shows that he is in fact the biggest and the baddest of them all, and that the orcs are, of course, the best? It's simply the fact that Grimgor, for the most part, can't make up his mind, or he has too much to deal with. He can only deal with one problem for so long before more need to be attended to, and the other person just rebuilds. Most of the time, though, he just straight up loses interest on what he's doing and gets frustrated and goes to bully or crump someone else, with it sometimes helping him narrowly escape fate, with him being able to escape certain destruction from his foes. Grimgor has a few relics that he saunters out into the battlefield with. They range from being very simple, yet increasingly cool, that make my little nerdy fantasy-loving mind explode, and then the not-so-subtle writing that this artifact is just a special piece of war gear that has an interesting name and looks weird, being called somewhat magical, even if we don't know if the object is magical at all. Its weapon is Gitsnik, an axe that shares its homeland with its wielder, made in the capital of the Chaos Dwarf Empire that has all sorts of magics added to it. Gitsnik is given its name by Grimgor because it's particularly good at snicking gits and chopping them in half. The axe itself, despite its constant use throughout hundreds of years, has never grown dull, with it quite possibly being given the enchantment in the demon forges it was made. It also allows Grimgor to gain strength and speed from charms and magics given to it by orc shamans. Grimgor's blood-forged armor is really frickin' sweet armor that allows Grimgor to endure the hardiest of blows and protect himself from damage, making him a one-man tank covered neck to toe in metal. Not head though, he's not wearing a helmet. Besides that, it doesn't have much magic to it unless you count the function of it in the game as canon, where it can cause a magical explosion that sends his foes away from him and doesn't hurt allies. Mork's all-seeing eye is a boon that Grimgor says he obtained by winning a headbutting match against Mork in a 1v1. It makes it so he has an uncanny favor because his god is always going to be looking over him, with him becoming somewhat of a walking avatar of Mork. Grimgor has taken many fights, migrating from area to area around the mortal realms. For the first bit of life, he fought the Chaos Dwarves for a while until he got bored. So he went to fight some Kislev forces for a while, before he finds a home feeding his fists to Skaven in the World's Edge Mountains, next to all of his other orc friends. And by friends, I just mean other greenskins. Treating this endless vermintide in the old dwarven tunnels like a summer home where he could reflect on his decisions and think about what he wanted to do next. Maybe he could go bug mankind or any other of the neighbors he could get his hand on, never losing a fight, being a monster that have his name spread around the realms, where he gained massive amounts of notoriety that Grimgor loves, being sure that everyone knows his name. When the world began to grind itself to a halt, and the end times began, Grimgor decided to take his armies out of the Badlands and the World's Edge Mountains range, and went on a rampage eastward, uniting orc tribes together under his banner, when he went and squished a few war bosses underneath his boot, as if it were nothing. This is because, during this time, the prophet of Gork and Mork, Warzag, put the pieces together and found out that the orc tribes would conglomerate under not one warlord, but two separate warlords that were the avatars of Gork and Mork, respectively. So, Grimgor, getting all these orcs together, gained a military force unlike anything ever amassed by an orc warlord ever. So when he went eastward, he somehow became the incarnate of a god that embodies beasts, making it so he became something like a beast himself. The Beast. Nah, just kidding. That's for Warhammer 40k, where a really cool prehistoric space orc comes back called the Beast, comes back and causes some shenanigans. Maybe we can talk about him sometime too. Warhammer 40k actually has no connection to Warhammer Fantasy besides the fact that chaos and gods and demons exist in these universes, and orcs are mushrooms, and some of them are just sci-fi riffs on fantasy creatures. Eventually, Grimgor stumbled upon the Ogre Kingdoms that were ruled over by the King of Ogres, Greasus Goldtooth. Everyone else just lets Grimgor bully and walk all over them, and Greasus fought back. And for that, he had his head bludgeoned in so bad by his own kingly scepter that you could swear that we were watching The Walking Dead right before most people stopped watching. Grimgor, through this, actually subjugated all the ogres into his army, giving him larger elite units, with them thinking that he was an avatar of the ogre's gods. Then, he descended upon the Grand Cathay and the Great Bastion, destroying them, being a conqueror sitting on his new forged empire. And then Grimgor got teleported to a battle to save the world or destroy it. The elves that summoned him would have died if they didn't use their silver tongues to tell Grimgor that they summoned him here to fight Archaon, the Ever-Chosen, who has gained power from the Chaos Gods and was still exponentially growing in power, with him saying that he could rival Grimgor and probably even defeat him, which was a lie. Archaon didn't know about Grimgor at all. Grimgor put up a fight, almost defeating Archaon in glorious single combat, until the Chaos Gods decided to buff Archaon and give him unbelievable speed, where Archaon, the Ever-Chosen, decapitated Grimgor. And just like that, he's gone. Which is much more a showcase for the issues of the end times, just killing off characters for no reason. Yeah, he just kind of dies without fanfare, but he does prove he's the biggest and the baddest before the Chaos Gods decide to juice Archaon, though, which is pretty sweet. So how about an older ending to Warhammer that was written off as an entirely different alternate reality because of the writing decisions being voted on by the community instead of being a story written to end a setting deemed as unprofitable? The Storm of Chaos alternate story is what most people consider a more desirable ending or story for Warhammer Fantasy that does some fun stuff with a smaller cast of characters, especially for the part that includes Grimgor in the Storm of Chaos, at the Battle of High Pass, where the Empire was all but destroyed until the Orcs came in to save the day. When all seemed lost for humanity, the Orcs came in thousands strong with their raiding parties. While Archaon fought humanity, suddenly Grimgor introduced himself to the fight with a headbutt, and his immortals took care of the other chaos-tainted troops around them, with Grimgor defeating Archaon in single combat, and then not killing Archaon, but sparing the Ever-Chosen, to go celebrate with his warband that Grimgor was in fact the biggest and the baddest of them all, saving humanity and receding back into the wastelands where most of the orcs reside. Some of you might be asking, so what? Grimgor is a character that plays the role of this giant villain that usually defaults to orc goofiness. never losing a fight, but never fully finishing one either, because he either gets bored, because the civilizations he attacks aren't fun to fight, or he has to deal with some other threat. What makes this character one that people like so much? There's like 3 reasons. The orcs and Grimgor are mostly antithetical, yet perfectly embody the ideas of fantasy or old school Warhammer, where life is brutal and hard, where the orcs hand out that brutality. But that being said, they are still kind of silly, even if they are horrifying if you're fighting against them. Grimgor feels like a primordial force of destruction that shows up to get his groove on, making him a threat that still sometimes goes after humanity, sacking and besieging their settlements, but also goes to destroy those pesky other things that go bump in the night. Also, he's playable in Warhammer Total War. He is the premier orc lord. He's one of the best one-on-one combatants in the game, and also in the lore, with a lot of people being introduced to orcs through him. That's all I got for this video. I really love this guy. Even if he isn't the funniest or even my favorite orc in Warhammer Fantasy, he's really awesome and has a lot of fun stuff he does. This video was pretty fun to make too. If you want me to cover more Warhammer Fantasy, make sure to tell me in the comments down below, and like and subscribe to show me that you'll stay interested. Till next video, fellas.